Hi, I'm Adrienne Montgomery, and this is a talk about ChatGPT, the new AI. It's important to note that this is taking place at the end of March 2023, and we're talking about the fourth version of ChatGPT because change is fast. The title for this talk was suggested by ChatGPT when I asked it for a lighthearted title and told it what I would be talking about. You may know me as SciEditor. I have written a number of books about editing and contributed to others, but I got my moniker from editing high school science textbooks for so long. I'm reaching my third decade in editing now. But of course, there is a large variety of science to be edited, and I don't do it all. When I'm not working, you'll find me taking my kayak down to Lake Ontario. That's me on the bike there. Or playing with fun things like the giant spirograph I made. So that we can talk about this, it's important to agree what the definition of AI is. AI, at its core, has to be constantly learning from the interactions it is having. And that's more than just clicking add to dictionary or things like that. The system has to exhibit some level of learning and adaptation. For that reason, decision-making systems, automation, and statistics are not qualified as AI. It's broadly defined in two categories, either narrow or general intelligence, so artificial narrow intelligence, or ANI, and artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And to date, AGI does not exist. Unlike human intelligence, such a narrow AI intelligence is only effective in the specific area in which it's been trained. We currently have some AIs that are working on fraud detection, for example, or facial recognition, or recommending the next post in our feed. It is not spell check, or Grammarly, or Siri, or as much as I love it and abide by the tool, it is not perfected. It is not a fact checker. It can't identify plagiarism. At best, it can do some similarity checks. And it can't be responsible for writing, according to the American Medical Association and the Chicago University and Chicago Manual of Style. Related to AI is machine learning. The ability to learn without being specifically programmed. And it is getting closer to that. What we know now is basically predictive text. Just like on your phone, ChatGPT was fed a huge amount of data, text from the internet, and then evolves and learns as each user is using it. It was only trained in English. But now they're expanding the language model that it's based on to include any language, such as computer code, images, and it's even starting to put that together and spontaneously speak new languages. Sorry, not new languages, languages other than English, languages it hasn't specifically been trained in. So just like my dictation on my phone or my computer, which I use a lot, is starting to understand that I swear and write out the swear words. It's also learning, I'm very excited that my dictation software built into my computer is starting to recognize that I talk about commas a lot and don't necessarily want a comma inserted where I say the word comma. I love that it's learning that. And my online searches are learning that when I look up a topic, I don't want the WikiHow on it, or necessarily the Wikipedia even. I want the journal article. I want the sources that I can fact check for the work I'm working on, work that I am working on. ChatGPT is also very conversational, so I'm not writing queries in it as I would have to the early electronic card catalog at a library. I'm just saying, as I did for writing the title of this talk, give me a title for a talk about blah, 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 and then make it funnier and make it geekier and you don't have to repeat the whole query, you just have a conversation. Of course, the training material was weird, that acronym. It was based on the people who created it, who were white, English-speaking, middle class, etc., etc. And it does not include in any way, shape, or form the 3 billion people on this planet who have no access to the internet. They did not contribute to the data ever. But the continued users do. And just as there are good users like you and me with good intentions, there are also trolls and bad actors and people with reprehensible morals, just as there is everywhere on the internet. Using AI isn't entirely new. In an article in the Scholarly Kitchen called AI and Scholarly Publishing, Helen King in particular is quoted as mentioning that lots of AI tools or algorithms are used in publishing already. And these are some of the ones that everyone in that article mentioned. Maybe you're using some, maybe you want to look into some, maybe some of them are particularly useful. It's good to know that this isn't a brand new thing. For your information, Helen King is the head of transformation at Sage Publishers, and she hosts the blog called PubTech Radar. Everything I say here requires caveats all the way down. Just like there are turtles all the way down, this has caveats all the way down. Because it's changing so fast that even by the time I get this talk online, it may be out of date. Just as growth in everything, the graph usually looks somewhat like a hockey stick with a long lead-in time at the bottom there, and then a quick, very rapid turn, an inflection point where everything starts to surge. At the moment, we may be at the inflection point or we may not. We may, in the future, find that we were still somewhere on the flat part of this. We don't know where we are. And we don't know if this hockey stick will eventually turn into an S and development will level off. The Center for Humane Technology, in a recent panel report discussion on the podcast called Your Undivided Attention, compared inflection points and maybe where ChatGPT is right now to the inflection point we experienced, or that was experienced, a whole society experienced this from when Oppenheimer's team developed the bomb. Hopefully the results won't be as devastating and societally transforming, but we don't know where we are right now. And we don't know what the effects of this inflection point will be. And it is being developed in an atmosphere that has much less oversight and much less secrecy than Oppenheimer's research did. OpenAI, who developed the one that caught all the attention, the GPT that caught all the attention, they released it to the public. We're using it. I tested it. It was free. They made it an open playground, which Oppenheimer did not do. Now other companies have bought the API from them or developed their own language models, their own data learning sets, and released their own AI. We see it in Microsoft is doing it, and Google's trying it, and everybody's trying to get in on the game. It's a wild playground. But is this moral? I mean, some people are trying, some groups are trying. I want to give you this great example, a fun example. I was trying to develop an editing test, a piece of text that I could use for students, because I teach at universities, I teach editing, and also to run these AI through and see if they can catch it. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, give me some bad advice for houseplant care. I thought that would be fairly innocuous and also fairly familiar, so people would be able to notice not just grammar errors, but all of the other things that editors look for, outlined in Editors Canada's professional editorial standards. For example, there are others which I'll share in the show notes. I wanted to know if it would notice bad advice, internal inconsistency, bias, so many other 500 things that editors are looking for beyond grammar. It gave me some really fun responses, and I'm still working on putting together that sample text to work with. Some of the bad advice it gave me was to pick up a plant every day and give it a little shake. I thought that was very creative, but it also at the end, so it gave me all these kind of bad advice. And at the end of that, it started adding, but remember, you asked me for bad advice, and you should not do this. And then it included a little text about ways to care for plants and how to be a good plant host, including things like soil and water and light. Some of the teams who have populated the AI have tried to be moralistic about it, have tried to vet the input data so that it's not populated with advice about hurting people or stories about people being hurt, so that it's not creating that pattern of text that then wants to repeat. Because remember, it's just a pre-programmed generative translator that predicts the next most likely word. At this point, that's what it is. In the newest version, if you ask ChatGPT 4 to tell you something harmful, how to do something harmful, how to build a bomb or create tear gas, it will tell you no. But the thing is to vet the content and make sure that it wasn't being trained on bad content, hurtful content, required some humans to vet that. And like Facebook, who hires a company to check all the reported images and reported text to determine if they break community standards, the OpenAI hired a company that hires people to look at these things. And I will share the newspaper stories about this event. The company ended up canceling their contract because their staff were so traumatized. They tried to be responsible by paying hazard rates for the work and by having counselors on site and the things that we do to support people who have to work on difficult materials. But it wasn't enough. The staff found that looking at these snippets, so it's only bad snippets, it's only potentially bad stuff. That's all they're looking at all day. They have a little anecdote here and a picture there and another little anecdote for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and that kind of onslaught of difficult material wore them down too much, and the company canceled the contract. So the morals go beyond just the use of it now and should be looking at how it was created as well. There was a great article in the New York Times. This is a little excerpt from it, and I'm sorry you can't read the very last two words on there. They are data and explanations. I'll give you a minute to read that. The important point is that we can create data matching and statistical algorithms, but so far we have not created a human mind. The human mind continues to be the most powerful supercomputer that there is. But again, we don't know where on that graph we are. We don't know if we're at this point of development or back here. That supercomputer that equals the human mind is predicted to be coming very soon. So let's look at where we are today. I did some performance tests of ChatGPT and some other things that people call AI, which are not AI, spell check and Grammarly in particular. Not to pick on them, but that's who's available and what most people are using, or the big contenders. And I also wanted to see if my editing students could be potentially using this to cheat. I always check, because while I absolutely encourage my students to use all the tools available, and for example, if they didn't use spell check, I would be mad, I also want to check that they are going beyond the tools or using the tools in a wise way. So I always put my exercises through the latest tools to see what the outcome is. So far in my Editor vs. AI series on the Right Angels and Polar Bears blog, which you'll find at scieditor.ca. I'll put those in the show notes too. I have tested ChatGPT for its detection of grammar, its ability to summarize, and to do some simple VBA coding for macros and for a wildcard find and replace. It's really, really basic stuff, but things that editors do all the time on their things. This is a roundup of how it has performed so far. Not great. The first thing I did was simply Google common grammar mistakes and find a post on a blog about this. Ironically, I found the Grammarly post called 10 Grammar Mistakes, and that is linked in my blog post rounding this up. And I ran that post through Word, and I ran it through Grammarly's own grammar checker, and I ran it through ChatGPT 3. At that time, it was number 3. And you can see how well or poorly they did. I have also since tried the copy edit this test that the New York Times puts online, and then the Chicago style workout that the Chicago Manual Style puts online, and saw how they performed. So as you look left to right at these results, we're looking at change over time. So as I said, ChatGPT is constantly learning. So every day, or even the second time I ask something, it should do a little better, even if I'm not giving it the answers, because it's learning over time. So I'm glad to see that on the right-hand column there, ChatGPT is doing much better than it was with the first one. I then, last week or 10 days ago, however long it was, that the next iteration came out, ChatGPT 4 was released. I tested it on some of these things again, and it did about 3 times better than version 3. So big improvement over time. Still not quite ready, because again, this is only checking grammar. It's not checking the myriad of standards that editors are concerned with. One of the early reasons I checked into this was because my students at university were going to the administration and saying, should I even be studying this? Why am I even here? Why am I even paying? ChatGPT is going to take over my work, and there's not even a future for me. At the moment, there is definitely a role for humans in the publishing and editing process. I don't know where we are on the hockey stick again, but there will always be a role for editors in this process. Even if that role at the very top of the developments ends up being the bespoke work or the really critical work of safety writing and research writing and medical advice and things like that, there will be work for editors, real humans who can apply their supercomputer to the words in front of them. The point of change reminds me of the circumstances when I first started editing, which is almost 3 decades ago now, and I think I had an easier entree or an extra foot in the door because there was this mass exodus happening. Editors were leaving the industry. They were retiring. They were changing jobs rather than learn how to use computers and start doing on-screen markup with track changes in Word and the tools on a PDF. They were just leaving. So there was this huge opening. There was a big need. And I was a curious person who came from a family of early adopters, and I knew how to use a computer and was eager to learn how to use it in new ways. So I got work. Some companies, I don't want to name names and pick on people, but the listicle generators out there and the other low quality content that have announced that they're letting go their writers and going to use ChatGPT instead. I don't think it's a great loss to humanity if listicles are now written by a generative text program instead of a human. There will still be a huge gap for grammar, or there is now, especially the really tricky grammar points, like is this sentence talking about one person or two, and dangling modifiers it's terrible at, and even internal consistency from one sentence to the next sentence. It's not yet comparing any of that. But that is only the tip of the iceberg of what editing is. And just like with anything else in life, you can adapt, you can prepare for the change, you can evolve, you can stick to your guns and just do it the way you always have. There will still be, at least for a while, maybe for the rest of your career, work out there that asks for that or will accept that. And of course, you can retire or change jobs. All of these are valid choices. Just depends what you feel like you're up to at the moment, and you can change your mind. It all depends, if there's a future, on where we are on this curve. And it depends on what happens next. Keep an eye on it. I will keep publishing tests and results at Editor vs. AI on scieditor.ca. And I will post in the show notes some other links to things I talked about. And in particular, you may want to listen to that panel podcast on your undivided attention from the Center for Humane Technology. It's something to keep watching. I am Adrienne Montgomery, Sci Editor Online. Come and find me out there and keep the discussion going. Thanks for listening.